Hello. Okay, so today we're going to cover the ECS Spot Blueprint. The ECS Spot Blueprint, it launches EC2 containers or EC2 instances that actually you're going to run your containers in. So those EC2 instances that we're going to launch is going to register yourself to like ECS Cluster, okay? So to kind of do this, we're going to use this. I should say, we're going to go ahead and do this both on production and the development VPCs here, okay? So we're going to have two clusters. We're going to have a production cluster, ECS cluster, and a development ECS Spot cluster. And this is on this ECS Blueprint right here, so let's click on that one. Okay, so under ECS Spot Blueprint, there are some prerequisites. You have configure settings. I covered that in another video, so please watch that video to figure out how to set that up. Okay, there's also the ECS IMA service roles. So let's check that out real quick. Okay, so on brand new accounts, you don't have these service roles yet, and you actually have to create these service roles in order for like the Spot fleets kind of to work, okay? If you don't have these accounts, these service roles yet, it's not going to work. So please create them on each account. Now, if you're using the lono-c command, what happens is the lono-c command actually is going to go ahead and create this. It's going to spit off some output saying, oh, not found, and then it's going to say, oh, create it, okay? But if you already have them created, then it's just going to silently kind of go forward, okay? So if you're using lono-c, which we're going to do, we don't have to create these service roles, okay? Okay, next thing is the ECS cluster. So we're going to actually create the ECS cluster with the CLI. Now, we're not going to do create an ECS cluster via the ECS console because the ECS console actually creates like a full network stack depending on which wizard you choose. And then that network stack is actually pretty tightly coupled to the ECS cluster. So it's to run like a stack that has like a mixture of like auto-scaling groups as well as spot fleets, you kind of want the cluster to be decoupled, okay? So we're going to actually use the CLI to create that. And notice we're going to create it for dev as well as prod, okay? That's based on the settings again. So I'm going to actually run those commands before I forget. So let me just run those commands right here. So it creates the first cluster, creates the second one, okay? All right. So now let's go back to the blueprint, ECS Spot Blueprint. So the usage is pretty standard. You add the blueprint in your gem file, which we don't have to do because we're using the reference architecture here, right? But this is how you would normally add it. Then we configure the spot values, okay? And then we deploy the blueprint. So it's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to go ahead and start configuring now. Okay, I'm going to grab these two commands, the C commands. Let's clear this window up and run both commands here. So that's lono-c with the lono-env dev development, then lono-env production. And then it's running that. Okay, so it created those config files here. Now let's open up and explore a little bit and see what we need to adjust, okay? Let's look at development. Okay, so development is here. That's cool. And production is here. Okay, so what the starter, what lono-c did is it generate these starter files, but we still have to fill out the values because we don't know which subnets and VPC you want your cluster to run in, okay? But you can configure these easily, so you can configure to pretty much any subnet you want. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to recommend the private app subnets that were created in the VPC here. So let's go back. I'm in the production account right now. I'm going to go to the CloudFormation template. I'm going to look at the output. So look, everything's here. The private app subnets. So I'm just going to grab these private app subnets right here. Okay, and that's where I would recommend running containers in, private subnets, okay? So this private app subnets designed specifically for this purpose. Then, oops, I think that was development. Yes, so I want to go to production here. Okay, because I'm in the production account right there, right? Now the production VPC, okay? And those are all the parameters I really need to configure, okay? Now I'm gonna go over to the development account and grab the same similar values, okay? So here's VPC again, outputs, okay? Private app subnets. Private app subnets right here. It's right in front of me. Okay, so private app subnets. Let's go to development, save that. Now grab the VPC, okay? Put this in here, save that. Okay, so this is a very configurable stack here. You could use any subnets, you could use any VPCs, and they're gonna register those spot instances onto the right cluster. Now the right cluster, like this is optional, like ECS cluster. If you want it, so this development isn't registered to development cluster, and this ECS cluster over here is registered to production. So how does that work? It's essentially the blueprint's using the lono-env value. So lono-env is going to either be development or production. It's going to basically register that. You could change this and have like my cluster here if you want, but these are optional parameters, okay? So I'm just leave it as is, and it should just work just fine. Okay, the next file is the variables file. Let's take a look at the variables file for development and production and see what those are about. So with the variables file, what happens is you kind of have this variables instance types here, and then you have kind of a hash of instance types, and then basically how much RAM CPU they have. So this is the structure that the blueprint expects, okay? So you have to specify whatever instances you want in your cluster. And the ECS Spot blueprint, it actually uses something called Spot Fleets. And Spot Fleets will actually allow you to specify a variety of different EC2 instances and give it weight, okay? So what the ECS Spot blueprint does is it uses RAM and CPU to basically calculate weight. That weight is mainly calculated on RAM right now. So you could basically say, give me a ECS cluster with 100 gigabytes of RAM, okay? And then what's gonna happen is the Spot Fleet, it's gonna figure out with the basically all these values here, it's gonna figure out the right weight distribution to give you 100 gigabytes of RAM. And like, let's go to one of these files right here, like max capacity. Max capacity is 100 right here. So basically, max capacity is gonna be 100 gigs of RAM here, 16, and you can configure for different needs. Right now, it's kind of based on RAM. Okay. Here, I want to point one more thing out here. You should choose instances that support E9 trunking. E9 trunking is just gonna make it. If you're using ECS with AWS VPC mode, you're gonna be able to launch more containers onto that instance if you're using EI trunking. So there's some links up here to EI trunking and what that's all about, but I recommend using instances that support EI trunking, okay? So that's kind of it. That's all we really need in order to launch this now. So let's go back here, close some of these things up. Okay, and let's go to the next command. So we covered configuration, we reviewed the files, and we configured the VPC subnets, and that's all we really changed, okay? The variables files we just left as is and kept with the example. Okay, and here's just a screenshot showing how to grab the values, which I just did. Okay, private app subnets recommended, covered that already. And repeat the process for both the development and production, okay? All right, now we are ready to deploy. So that's kind of it. We just run this command, and then we'll be ready to deploy. Okay, so let's go run that. That's going to deploy the development one. Okay, and then run this one, and that's going to deploy, go ahead, the production one. Okay, so that is it. We are now spinning up the Spot, ECS Spot fleet right now. So here it is. It's spinning up events. You can see it. Okay, so it's creating some security groups. It's creating some roles. Okay, and then it's going to take a couple minutes to create this. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video so you don't have to wait. Okay, so the ECS Spot cluster has finished completing or creating. So let's just take a look at the events real quick here. So it started at 20:04, it finished at 20:07. So it took about 3 or 4 minutes to create here. Okay, and that's the dev account. That's also, let's look at the prod account, production account, and also Spot is finished creating there too, okay? So these instances, let's look at the EC2 console first, okay? Because I'm guessing that's what most people might start off with. You can see there's running 2 instances here, and they're nicely labeled and everything, okay? And then you should be able to look at the cluster. Remember, we created this kind of like this cluster with the CLI. You can see it has 2 running containers or container instances, which are EC2 instances, right? And here are the 2 EC2 instances here, okay? Now let's also check dev for the same thing, okay? And we can go to ECS instances. There's 2 of them right there, okay? So both those instances have been created. Now, I did mention that we're using SSM Manager to kind of be able to, access these machines. So let me just actually show you an example of that real quickly. This does rely on the SMS Manager repo to set that up. But look, I'm actually in the instance. So I actually hop straight to the instance. And this is done by a very secure mechanism called Session Manager, okay? And no ports need to be open for this. So it's pretty a nice way of accessing instances. So you can do Docker PS here. I'm not in the right user. So you got change over to user, Docker PS, and there's no containers running yet, okay? So I just want to show you that really quickly, okay? Let me exit back out, and let's go review the blueprint real quick. So we basically deployed everything. We've confirmed that the container instance is registered to the ECS cluster. This talks about Session Manager right here, being able to access the instance. You can kind of look on the script here that sets all up right here. There's a script that sets it up, and talks about why Session Manager is, I think, a better way to basically set up access. It's completely audible and it's completely centralized and very secure. Okay, no bashing host needed. Okay, and then the rest is just considerations. And so with Spot, what is happening is whenever those instances maybe get interrupted, now it's rare, but if it does happen, then the instances are configured so they're going to drain basically containers off of that instance to another instance that's available. Okay, so remember this actually Blueprint uses a Spot fleet, so you could specify as many instance types as you kind of want, and then it's just going to figure out capacity for you. So it's a pretty, I think, awesome way of kind of running things. Okay, so lastly, just review one more time. We added the blueprint to the gem file. It was already kind of in there. Then we configured the Spot values. It's really only the parameters, the variables we left alone, but you configure that to your heart's content. Then we deploy the blueprint. This is pretty simple. Okay, so that is it for this video. Hopefully that was helpful. Cheers.